Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Jeff Wasielewski. I'm the commercial tropical fruit crops agent for University of Florida and Miami-Dade County. Today, we're going to talk about the 10 universal truths of tropical fruit horticulture. So this is everything I know. So once you get this, you won't need me anymore because I'm going to give you the 10 top things that I know, and then you're good to go after that. So I have my chat open. If you have questions as we go, you can put them in the chat. Try to make them correspond to what we are looking at here. So let's get started. So welcome to Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. We have two more coming up, one in March and one in April that are already set. March 15th will be the Sapotacea. That's going to be Canistel, Meme, Sapodilla, everything in the Sapotacea. And then we're going to have one on proper pruning, April 19th. I do have a class, I believe it's March 27th, a live in-person class that will be at the Fruit and Spice Park. And that class will be very similar to today, except you have to pay for it. And we'll also be going out into the Fruit and Spice Park and looking at different plants. So I don't think you can sign up for that yet, but you could call the Fruit and Spice Park and sign up. I think you could do that by phone, actually. Okay, so University of Florida, IFAS Extension, Miami-Dade County. University of Florida has an extension office in every single county, all 67 counties. We also have research centers. There is a research center down here in Homestead. You see the circle is my office, and then the triangle is the research center, Tropical Research Education Center. There we have a tropical fruit specialist, tropical fruit entomologist, tropical fruit plant breeder, a pathologist that works with tropical fruit. So all these great people that know a bunch of things, and I talk to them, I take the information that they have, and I extend it out. That's what extension is. So I always like to begin with, where can you get information? A great spot that's all peer-reviewed publications that are easy to read and understand is called Ask IFAS. Used to be called EDIS. So you just punch in, you search Ask IFAS space UF, and you'll find this. Then it has this bar, what can we help you with? You put mango in there, and you'll get about 5 different publications on mangoes, including a big one that tells you everything about the mango. We'll even give you a chart on when to do what, like when to water, when to fertilize. We'll look at one of those charts later today for lychee. Other universities, a good spot to get information because you know it's from professors and PhDs. And that you can search with EDU, and then you will usually find other universities. YouTube, great place to get information because you're actually seeing what they're doing. Of course, there's plenty of bad information there, but if you're just trying to find out how to pollinate a passion fruit, you can look at 2 or 3 or 4 different videos and really get the idea of how to do it. All the Tropical Fruit Tuesdays from the past are on YouTube. Today is a new one, so it's going to go on YouTube as well. I should have it up tomorrow. And another good place to get information is Master Gardeners. A lot of you that are watching are Master Gardeners, or you've worked with Master Gardeners. Very good source of information. They go through a lot of training, and they do a lot of volunteer work. Best place to get information is your own garden or your own grove. If you see it with your own eyes, then you know it's true. So it's very important that you walk your garden, you walk your grove, you do this every day so you can actually see what's going on and you can respond to things before they become a big problem. And then finally, beware the source of your information. It's certainly possible that you could just Google something and then get bad information if you just go with the first thing that's there, because not everything is always correct. So number one truth of tropical fruit horticulture. Tropical fruit trees, more than other trees, need sunlight. They need full sun. So you need to get them in areas where there's full sun. If you have a grove, you need to keep them pruned so they can all get sunlight. They don't grow into each other. They need that sun to have the energy to make the flowers and the fruit, because it takes a lot of energy to do that. So they need a lot of sunlight. So don't plant something, let's say on the north side of a 2-story house. That's going to be an issue because the sun is actually sort of goes east to west, but it tilts towards the south. So anything in the north side of the house is going to be very shaded. Same thing with big trees. Don't plant right on the north side of that, and don't plant too close together. So here's a lychee tree in a grove, and you can see a lot of shade down below. Was not able to get any, they're not going to get any fruit down here. The fruit is going to be way up at the top, so maybe 30 feet up. Very, very hard to get the fruit, and not a good amount of fruit because of all that shade. And this is because they let the tree get big and they let the trees grow into each other. So they're shading each other out. So they need the pruning to get the sunlight that they need. So here's a good example of plenty of spacing. This is a mango grove, an estate grove. And you see lots of spacing. As long as they keep these trees pruned, they're going to be able to keep full sun on all the leaves, and then that's going to be very important and good. So here's the lychee grove. It's the same grove. On the left, you see the interior of the grove. So it's very shady. Everything's growing together. If you look at the very top, you can see some fruit there. This is taken at the same day as the one on the right. So you see a little fruit up at the top, certainly nothing below, almost even no leaves down below. Then you look at the picture on the right where they had a road in between, so everything was getting sunlight, and you see lots and lots of fruit there. So that makes a big difference if you can get sunlight on your tree. And another thing you're looking at is, you see this picture on the right, the trees are sort of angled where they're bigger at the bottom and a little smaller at the top. There's like an angle there. That's a good thing, because then the whole tree can get sunlight because of that angle. It's not straight up and down. Okay, number 2, you need your fruit tree to be properly planted. I can't tell you how many groves I go to. This is not homeowners. I don't go to homeowners. This is groves where they've planted their trees too deep. This was a commercial grower who had a jackfruit, a couple jackfruit amongst other things that he was growing. And some of the jackfruit on the property were looking very good. This one looked like this, very poor. I went down, you can see sort of here where I dug down. I couldn't find the first flare root, so it was planted way too deep. Another thing you see here is all the native soil is on the outside, but in the middle here, they put in some sort of black muck. So that's not good. You want to use the native soil, because that's going to be much better than trying to add something there, because that's going to change the composition of what your roots are in. So our soil, if you look at this picture on the left, everything in the green, the light green, is higher rocky areas. That's this Oolitic limestone on the right. And then this color here, this is marl. So, and these are little marl finger glades. So marl is lower lying, and it's where water has continuously gone over this rock, so it turns into like a clay substance. Now, most of you are going to be on this rocky area, so you're going to have limestone when you go and you dig down. And the pH of that is going to be very high. And this is marl. This is taken down here and Flamingo and the Everglades over here. So this is what marl looks like. Typically, you're not going to find this when you dig. It's going to be limestone. So here is the grove I went to, and you can see I actually had to drive up to get to it because it had this little 2-foot elevation because the rocky areas are a little higher than the marl areas. So it is limestone, it's not coral. People will sometimes call it coral. It's definitely not coral, it's limestone. So make sure you make that distinction. So no questions in the chat so far. You guys are just really listening. And now, we talked about properly planting. So how are we going to dig the hole? You have a couple different ways to do it. One, you can use an auger like this picture on the left. If you're going to certainly be digging a whole grove or planting a whole grove, you're going to want to use either that or a backhoe. The picture on the right is in marl, and they just use a shovel to dig that hole. But typically you're going to see what's on the left. And the auger kind of smooths out the sides of the hole. So I'm not sure if that's the best way. One good way is a backhoe. And you can see on the picture on the right, all these holes they made. They dug very deep. You can see all that came out was limestone. And here's the picture on the left. And they actually went a little too deep because they hit the groundwater. So I had to give them the bad news that they dug all these holes and they actually went a little too deep, because you don't want to plant down in that. Certainly not. Varify asks, root flares should be above ground or barely in the soil. Just above the ground or barely in the soil. Both are good. I'm going to show you some pictures, Var, so you can actually see. So another way, if you're just digging a hole or two, you can use pickaxe. This is going to be your best tool. Certainly not a shovel. It's not going to get it done in that limestone I just showed you. And you want to check the roots. So you take the plant out of the pot, and if you see any of these roots that are wrapping around, that's circling roots or root binding. You see the picture on the right. Is another example of one that was in a pot too long. This was in a quart-sized pot. This looks like it was in a 3-gallon pot. So they're wrapping around. So you don't want that. If you do see that, when you take it out of a container, go ahead and cut it. Cut it and let it spread out. Tiffany asked if the holes are too deep, just backfill. And the answer is yes. And Jorge has answered that question as well. I want to thank Jorge. He's here for a lot of these Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. He answers a lot of questions. And you see the photo credit down below, Dr. Stephen Green, he does the same thing. I don't know if he was able to get on. He was texting me that he was having trouble getting on. So I'm not sure if he was able to. Actually, I see the text, he was not able to. So that's stinky. Okay. So too deep is bad. You see the picture on the right. This was another mango grove. They had 100 at least mangoes. They were all planted too deep. They all were doing terribly. And you can also see right here on the right, on the bottom, you see some weed whacker damage. So that's also going to be an issue, which we'll talk about in a moment. So here's an avocado tree that was dead. And I pulled it out of the ground and I laid it down. So we're looking at it from above. Jean asked, how do you help the plant recover from circling roots? Okay, Jorge's answered that. So you guys can look in the chat for the answers there. So we're looking at it from up above. I laid it down and you can see right about where the tape is binding into the trunk here. That's about where it was planted. And we go down, 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 and we don't really see a flare root. Maybe this one right here is the first flare root. So this was planted at least 3 inches, 3.5 inches too deep. So that was one of the things that killed it. Another thing was this binding of the tape here. They never took it off. So the tree kept growing, but the tape pinched it. And up here, we see some weed whacker damage as well. And we probably had some Roundup or herbicide because you see all these dead weeds here and then new weeds growing in. So you had a lot of things going on with this avocado, and a combination of all those things probably is what killed it. So here we see in the same grove, another avocado, another dead avocado. I pulled it out of the ground, laid it down, so we're looking at it from above. You see massive weed whacker damage, but you do see that it was planted at the right depth. So that's one thing. You see all these flare roots, these big roots. You can see that the planting was right there. So that's a good planting. So we want to plant the proper depth. You asked the question earlier, Var, where the flare roots should be. So this is probably pretty good. This is right above. They can be right below as well. Remember, we're probably going to put some mulch around this, so that will help to cover these flare roots. So to the left, you see another dead mango. And, oh, excuse me, jumping around. Another dead mango, and here, this line where my mouse is, that's where it was planted to. So a good 4.5 inches too deep. And down here, we see some circling roots as well. This is what's too long in a 3-gallon pot. Then on the right, you see one still in the ground. You see the root or the tape binding here, biting in. And then I dug down, I dug down, I dug down. I never found a flare root. So here we're 4 or 5 inches too deep. You see I put my hand pruners in there to show the depth and never found a flare root. So these trees were not doing good. And obviously that was a reason why. So planting, remember we're doing proper planting. We're trying to do proper planting. What are the steps? Number one, you want to remove the grass. So you take your pickaxe, you just remove it out. What I do is I put the grass into the bucket, the actual pot, and take the plant out of the pot. We're going to look at that pot, make sure, or the roots, make sure they're not circling. If they are just a little bit, you can just kind of tickle it a little bit and let them spread out. So you dig the hole a little bit bigger, a little bit wider than the container, and just about as deep as you want it, as it needs to be to get it at the right level. Then you drop in the plant carefully and you make sure it's at the right level. You only get one chance to do this. So if it's too deep, if you dug the hole too big, which probably you didn't because of the limestone, then you can backfill it a little. But if you didn't dig it deep enough, you need to take the plant back out of the container and start digging again to get it at the right depth. Then you backfill it with this native soil here, and any soil that you see that's still in the container, like you see right here in between my feet, there's some dark, good soil that came from the container. So we want to get that into where the roots are because it's going to have some slow release fertilizer in it. I see Jean and Jorge going at it down there in the chat, so I'll let that just play out. So you get it down there, you get it at the right level, you backfill it, and then it's a good idea to put something around it to protect it. In this case, we put a couple, I think it was just one bag of mulch. And then, of course, you want to water. You want to water right after you plant it. You get the soil to touch the roots. You give it some water to get ready to start growing. Victor asked how small of a grove would qualify for a field visit. I have a total of 18 trees. So I would say, Victor, if you're selling them commercially, then that would be a field visit. But if you just have them for yourself, then no field visit, because I'm a commercial agent. So number 3, we did number 1, we did number 2. Number 3, protect your plants. And we kind of talked about that a little bit in the planting section. Lorraine asked what kind of fertilizer. We're going to get to that, Lorraine. We have a section. You stole one of my 10 truths, which is coming up. So the protection, take a look at this loquat here. This is at the Fruit and Spice Park. And you can see they have all the grass and weeds removed for about a good 2 feet, all the 2 feet all the way around it. And then they put this little plastic around the base, which allows you to keep it protected from weed whackers. So this is a really good example of how to protect your plants. Veronica asked if you must add more soil besides what you have left in the pot, what kind of soil can you use? I would use something with good drainage. So if you don't have enough from the hole and from the pot, because that happens sometimes, there just wasn't enough soil in the hole was already kind of dug a little. I would use something with really good drainage, so something with a lot of perlite. Tiffany asks, is it recommended to add fertilizer at planting? The container will have slow, if you buy it from a nursery, it'll have slow release fertilizer in it. So you don't need to add anything. That's why I want you to get that soil that came in the pot back in the hole, because it's going to have some slow release fertilizer. It looks like Ralph has his hand up. Ralph, do you have a question to ask? Just give me a yes or no by shaking your head. Yes, you do. Can you type it into the chat, Ralph? I'll be looking for it. So here's something I talked about with the binding of this. Here's a tag, and it had a metal connection here, and it bit into the tree. So it was just on there for too long, and they never let it expand as the tree expanded. Here on the right, we see another one that had tape too long, and it bit into the tree. So what I like to do is when I get a new plant and I plant it in the ground, I take off the tape that would cause this right here. I take it all the way off, and then I move the bamboo stake that it came with a little bit to the side, and then I retie it with this sort of tape like this. So it'll still keep it upright, but it allows it to move a little bit, and it allows it to grow and not bite in. So once this gets a little bit bigger, we can remove this totally, because the roots will be holding the tree in place, and you'll no longer need to keep it up with a stake. So this is what I do. So again, we're talking about protection. You can use mulch. Tree trimmer mulch is probably the best. You see, this is one of the trees in my grove here at work. And I have this little plastic thing around here. We have a good wheelbarrow full of mulch. You need to make it like a donut, where you pull the mulch back so it's not covering the trunk. And you can see right here, when they mowed, they ran over the mulch ring. So you can imagine if that mulch wasn't there, it would be hit. I've had a lot of my trees hit by the mower in the grove. Bob asked, where can you get expandable tags? These aren't really expandable. This is just, I tied it a little loose. This is called tree tape. You can probably get that at a big box store or a smaller hardware store. But it's not really expandable. It's just, I tied it kind of loose and left some space there. This is actually in my yard. I used the limestone rock that came out of the hole to protect the tree. Tiffany asked, can you elaborate why tree trimmer mulch is best? I like it. It's very natural. A lot of times you'll get it for free if you ask the tree trimmers for their mulch load, because they need to dump it as trash. And a lot of the mulch that you buy, it's not harvested sustainably. And another thing is, it doesn't really decompose that well. If you've ever noticed, some of that mulch just stays really, it doesn't really decompose that well, where this tree trimmer mulch will decompose. And when it does that, it creates soil and helps out that limestone rock. So here's why you don't want to hit your trees with the weed whacker or let them bind, because in these dicots, you have the middle, this is the xylem where things go up. On the outside, you have the phloem where things go down. If you cut that, the energy that the tree makes and sends it down to the roots is not going to get there. So it's sort of starving itself. So here's a protection I put on, and you see they weed whacked right through it. And there's some nice little Adamoya that got run over. So you don't always get to protect everything, but you can do the best you can and hope that the weed whacker guy doesn't get to it. So number 4 is water wisely. Don't water too much, don't water too little, water just right, baby bear. So 30-year historical average rainfall for us here in Miami-Dade, you see it's just about 60 inches. This is 30-year average. And if we break that down into dry season and wet season, we see that we get most of our water from May to October, 45 inches compared to November through April, only 14.5. So obviously you're going to water a little bit more in the dry season if you have fruit on the tree, because you're going to need to give the growing fruit some water. But again, things do slow down in the dry season, so they don't grow as much, so you don't need to water quite as much. And one way you can really tell how much water is in the soil is with a little rain gauge like this. You can buy a more expensive one, but this is probably a couple dollars, put on a 2x4 and some concrete. And when it rains, you can actually just check here and see how much rain you actually got. Because a lot of times it will look like you got a lot of rain, but when you check the rain gauge, it wasn't as much as you thought. And at that point, you may need to water, especially your new plantings. So here's a mango grove. You see the big trees in the back here that are looking good, and these two are dead. They're actually next to a nursery, so they were just getting constant water all the time. So that was not watering wisely. I'm going to skip through this. Number 5 is scout often. This is what I talked about at the very beginning. Take a look at your grove. Take a look at your yard. Walk the grove. Then you get to see things that happen before they get too bad. Here's a mango that's full of sooty mold, which tells us it probably has scale. Actually, this leaf right here is turned over, and you can see the orange scale on there. So if we would have seen this initially and just seen the scale before the sooty mold, we could have got rid of that scale. So here's another mango that's full of sooty mold. But if we look underneath, because we're scouting, we see these little guys, which are young ladybugs, and they're actually eating all the scale. Here's a scale here, scale, 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 and these guys are eating that. So by scouting, you can see that the natural predators are doing a good job. So you would not have to really spray. And if you were to spray a chemical, you'd probably kill more natural predators percentage-wise than you would of the actual pest. Number 6, this is a rule that you should use for everything, not just tropical fruit. And that is the right plant in the right place. Here's a meme that was planted in an area that was low-lying, and when meme have their roots wet, they get something called Pythium root rot. So that's what's going on here. So it is the right plant, but it's not in the right place. It needs to be in a little higher elevation. So here's a cocoa plum. We're sort of stretching the definition of tropical fruit, but this is one you can eat. But this is right by the seashore, and it's the right plant in the right place. They're using it as a screening hedge, and it grows perfectly by the seashore because that's where it naturally grows. Same thing with the sea grape. You see it's giving fruit. It's looking great. It's right here by the water. This is in Flamingo in the Everglades. So right place, right plant, right place in these cases. And most tropical fruit that you're dealing with will do well in our soils. So you pretty much have the right plant in the right place as long as you get into sunlight. Number 7 of our 10 is proper nutrition. You definitely want to keep your plants looking their best. Many plants will do well with not a lot of nutrition given in, not a lot of extra fertilizer given to them. But you want to keep your trees looking good. So a typical fruit tree label is an 839. You want that last number, the potassium, to be the highest. The middle number can be very low, even lower than 3. The first number is nitrogen, so you don't want that number to be too high. I would even like something more like a 4 to 10, something like that. You just want that last number to be high. And when you look at your label, these numbers are always going to be nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, always in that order. And they're going to break down the nitrogen, nitrate, ammoniacal, other water soluble, and water insoluble. The water insoluble is going to be slow release. If we look down at the bottom, it says it has 1.9 units of slow release nitrogen. You want some of it to be slow release. So look for that. Look for this water insoluble nitrogen to have some percentage. Then also, if you see things that say like sulfur or polymer coated, that's slow release too. So if we look down here, we see sulfate of ammonia. So that's going to be slow release. We see polymer coated sulfur and coated urea. So that's going to be slow release. So we want slow release. Victor asked, will you have access to this recording? Yes, Victor, by tomorrow, I should have it up on YouTube. And you can just go to YouTube and go in the search bar and search Tropical Fruit Tuesday. And then all the different Tropical Fruit Tuesdays will come up. So remember, our limestone is high in pH, 7.8 to 8.8, somewhere up there. So don't get too bogged down by this. Just look at the bars, how fat they are. So these things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, they're pretty fat when you go down here to the pH level. And see, the pH 7 is neutral. So all up here is alkaline. So if we look at about 8.8, we see copper, zinc, boron, manganese, iron. These are microelements, and they do not get picked up in the high pH because the high pH binds them. So these guys with the fat bars, we can put them on the ground with granular fertilizer, but these we can't. So we have to do it a different way. So where do you do it? The macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, we can put that on the ground, and we put that here in the drip line through granular fertilizer like the 839 that I showed you. These other things, boron, chlorine, copper, manganese, these you would have to spray as a foliar onto the leaves. And you can get a foliar micronutrient mix where it has everything in it. You just mix it with water, you spray it on the leaves, on the top, on the bottom, till the water comes off. And you do that in the rainy season. Now, iron is a special micronutrient, and you can get chelated iron, and you put that on the ground. I should have wrote chelated there. It's with a CH. And you put that on the ground, and the chelation allows it to get through the pH. Eric asked, where is it best to water, nearest the trunk or along the drip line? Not near the trunk. That's where you're going to have the bigger roots, unless it's a young tree. So yeah, out here, sort of in between the trunk and the drip line would be a good spot. Don't clump your fertilizer when you throw it out. Spread it out on the drip line. Don't clump it like this. That'll burn your roots. Here's an example of one of those charts that I told you are in the Ask Edith documents. So this will tell you, this is for lychee, but it has it for like mamey, canistel, mango, longan. So this tells you the months. It tells you when to look for disease, when to look for insects, when to fertilize, when to do micronutrients, when to do iron, when to mow, when to do herbicide, when to irrigate, all these things. So this is a real good thing to have. And another chart they usually have is how much fertilizer to put depending on the age of your fruit tree. So of course we need our trees to be properly propagated. So what does that mean? They should be asexually propagated, not from seed. This is grafting here on the left. Here's a tree that's being grafted. So this top part is a clone of whatever you want. Let's say you want a Hayden mango. So we take this top part and we're going to clone it by grafting it into another mango. So the top is Hayden, we know for sure. This on the right is a seedling mango, and it's not going to be the same as if we plant the seed of a Hayden. When this grows up, it's not going to be a Hayden because it was a Hayden tree, but it was pollinated by something else. Just like you're not a clone of one of your parents, you're a mix, the seed will be the same. So you don't want that. You want to do it asexually by grafting. Here's a grafting class. They're all grafting. We do have a tropical fruit class or Tropical Fruit Tuesday on grafting, so you can check that out. The other thing about growing from seed is it has to go through all the stages of maturity. So it's a baby mango, toddler mango, texting mango, Instagram mango, TikTok mango, college mango, mature mango. It has to go through all these stages of sexual maturity. Then it's old enough to produce fruit if it's from seed. If you graft it, you're taking a piece of that Hayden and it's already sexually mature. So you don't need to let it get older. So if you plant something from seed, it can take 12, 15 years before it will fruit. So properly propagated is important. Here's a very young mango that's already trying to bloom. And that wouldn't happen to this tree on the left that's from seed. It would have to grow many, many years before it would be able to produce fruit. And Bob asked, do we have a chart for avocado? Where to obtain it? Yes, Bob, go to Ask IFAS, put in avocado, and you'll find a publication called Growing Avocado in the Home Landscape. It'll be there. And thank you, Jorge, for answering Dalton's question on what is a good rootstock for mango, and which is turpentine. Number 9, proper pruning. You definitely want to have your tree pruned. Like I said earlier, it needs to get all that sunlight, and if you just let it grow, another thing that will be difficult, it will be hard to get the fruit because it will be so tall. So why do we prune? Size control, easier to spray, helps with disease control, for airflow, reduces the amount of chemicals you need, higher quality fruit because it's getting more sunlight and more air. Overall health of the tree, we're taking out dead wood. Sorry, my mouse keeps clicking. And the beauty of the tree, it will look better and to get more fruit. That's your main reason why you're doing it. So here is a carambola that I pruned. I was pruning it for height control and getting it open. So this was the very first cut I made. It was just one tall branch or one tall trunk. So I made this cut that's circled. That was my first cut. Then a year later, you had these 3 strong verticals that came out. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to remove those 3 and let these horizontal branches stay in there, but get rid of these strong verticals. And we do have a Tropical Fruit Tuesday on pruning online, and we also have one coming up in 2 months. So here's what it looked like. On the left, you see these strong verticals. They're going to be removed. Here it is after they've been removed. Now we have a nice 6-7 foot tree with still plenty of area where you can get fruit. And that's what all that was taken off. Here it is a year later. And you can see here the old cuts I made that I just showed you. Here's the original cut. And here's another strong vertical that's coming up. So we're going to remove that. So we're removing these strong verticals again. And then on the right, you see we keep the height. So year after year, we keep this really good height. It kind of goes a little wider, but you can see it's full of flowers. So it's going to have plenty of fruit. And Dalton and Veronica, who work here, can tell you that it has plenty of fruit. They've seen it. Bob asks, how or where for grafting class on Tuesday? Go to YouTube, type in Tropical Fruit Tuesdays, and you'll find it there. Tropical Fruit Tuesdays grafting, and you'll find it there, Bob. And this is what was removed. So where to cut? If you look on the right, we want to leave this little collar and make your cut there. I'm going to skip this. You don't want to leave these stubs like this. This is a pruning I did. I left these stubs. You see they're rotting away. See it's rotting. So that's not good to leave a stub like that. I should have made the cut down here. And when do you prune? This is a question I always get. And the best time to prune is after you pick that last fruit. If you notice, if you look real hard on those carambola pictures that I showed you, there were little fruit there were some fruit there were flowers. So none of those were the best time to prune that. It should have been when the last fruit were picked. But as Veronica and Dalton can tell you, those trees constantly have fruit on them all the time. So they're very hard to prune where you're not making a mistake and taking off some of the fruit. So you do want to prune when you pick the last fruit, because that's going to not mess up the blooming and the fruiting cycle. Right now, if you were to prune your mangoes, they have flowers on them, or they're going to push out flowers soon. So that would certainly disrupt the amount of fruit you get. So here's how grove owners do it. They do this topping and hedging. They cut the top, they cut the edges with a big machine that looks like this. Here's the machine. I'm going to skip this. And so remember, we're pruning to control the height, open it up so we don't have to use these big picking poles. And finally, number 10, we want to promote pollinators and use integrated pest management. So integrated pest management, and we do have a Tropical Fruit Tuesday on that, is you have these pillars: cultural, physical, biological, chemical, regulatory. Regulatory we don't often get because that's where the state will come in and control the pest. But chemical, those are pesticides. But that's just one tool in your belt. Biological, that's what we're looking at right here, where the ladybug is eating the aphids. Physical, this is something like a barrier, like with the guava, they put a bag around the fruit so fruit flies can't get it. And cultural, this is something like keeping the tree pruned so it gets open to air and it doesn't get as many pests. So integrated pest management combines several complementary pest control methods in a mutually enhancing way to reduce pest populations to less than damaging numbers. There is no silver bullet. We have to use all these things together. Keys to IPM: know your plants. Again, right plant, right place. Know your pests and the damage they cause. Monitor, scout. This was one of our 10 truths. So we want to scout. We want to get out in the groves and look. Decision making: when to control, intervention, when do you really put in something like pesticides, and record keeping. These are all keys to integrated pest management. And so our 10 truths: they need full sun, they should be properly planted, they should be protected, you need to water wisely, you need to scout, you need the right plant in the right place, you need proper nutrition, properly propagated, proper pruning, a lot of P's, promote pollinators, and use IPM. So these are our 10 truths. Now, I'm going to ask if you would just do this really quick survey. You can scan this with your phone, or in the chat, I put a link. You just click on that link. It'll be 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes, 5 questions, very quick. You can answer that. That will help me to do a better job next time, which I always want to do. So you can certainly put anything wrong in there, but you can put the right things too. Won't mind that. So scan that with your phone, that QR code. It'll take you to the survey, very easy, or you can get it in the link. And I want to thank you guys for coming. Thank you for being here. It was a pleasure giving you this Tropical Fruit Tuesday. So if you could scan that, that would be great. I'm going to put the link again in the chat. Oops. Okay, thank you guys. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming. We're going to go ahead and end this. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we'll have another one next month and another one after that until I can't think of any more things to say. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much.